Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a trip back in time to ancient Rome, to the world of gladiators.
A fascinating subject indeed.
Yeah, we asked you guys to send over some excerpts from the Wikipedia article on gladiators. And, well, let's just say I'm ready to move beyond the Hollywood spectacle.
Yeah.
A gladiator is a classic, for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot more to uncover, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. What makes the gladiators so interesting, you see, is their story goes way beyond the arena. It touches upon religion, politics, even military strategy in Rome. They were more than just entertainment, really. How they came about, how they changed over time. Well, that tells us a lot about Roman society as a whole.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The first thing that kind of surprised me was the whole question of where gladiator combat actually began. I always thought, it was a purely Etruscan thing.
Right.
But this Wikipedia article, it throws us a bit of a curveball.
Yeah, it's a common misconception for sure. But when you look at the evidence, especially some 4th century BC frescoes from Paestum, things get a little more, well, complicated.
These frescoes, they depict ritual combat. And here's the kicker. They actually predate any clear Etruscan evidence of gladiators.
Exactly.
We're talking images that could link back to ancient Greek traditions. It's like finding a missing link almost.
It really is. These early companion frescoes, they give us a peek into a possible origin story that goes beyond what we usually think of with Roman culture. And it reminds us that the Romans were influenced by, well, everyone they met and conquered.
Okay, so we've got this possible origin story of these ritual combats. But how did we go from somber funeral rites to these massive spectacles we see in the movies? The Wikipedia article, it mentions this guy named Decimus Junius Brutus Dieva held the first Roman gladiator games way back in 264 BC.
That's right. But it's important to remember the context. Brutus Scaeva, he wasn't putting on a show for the masses. He was holding these games to honor his father, who had died. These early games, they were deeply personal, tied to their beliefs about death and the afterlife.
So imagine you're in ancient Rome, you're mourning someone you've lost. These games weren't just for fun, They were a way to maybe appease the spirits of the dead, to ensure their safe journey into the next world.
Absolutely.
So it starts as this very intimate, personal thing, a religious thing. But then things begin to change, don't they?
Precisely. As Rome's power grows, these games, they become more and more public. They shift from private rites into, well, political tools, a way to show off Roman dominance and keep the people entertained, all at the same time.
And that's when you start to see gladiator types that actually mirror Rome's enemies. You've got Samnites, Thracians, Gauls, a living representation of Rome's conquests right there in the arena.
Exactly. It was a way for Rome to conquer its enemies again and again, symbolically, to reinforce their power for everyone to see. And for those watching, it gave them a glimpse into these other cultures that Rome was encountering as it expanded.
Wow. So we go from personal rituals to these grand public displays, and then they just explode, right, in terms of scale. And extravagance. Trajan's games, the Wikipedia article mentions them, back in 108, 109 AD, 10,000 gladiators, 11,000 animals. And this goes on for, get this, 123 days.
It's hard to fathom, isn't it?
That's not just a local event, that's a massive spectacle.
It really shows how far things had come. From those somber rituals to these elaborate productions meant to, well, shock and awe the audience. Imagine the music, the costumes, the rules. It was theater, but with, well, blood sport.
All this grandeur, the scale of it all, make you wonder about the people behind the masks, What were their lives actually like?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the spectacle of it all.
Yeah.
And forget that these were real people with lives, families, dreams, and they were all risking their lives out there. And their stories, well, they're more diverse than you might think.
Right.
Some were slaves, forced into combat.
Yeah.
Others, condemned criminals, hoping for a shot at redemption.
Yeah.
But then you have the, what are they called? The octorati?
Octorati.
Yeah, those who actually volunteered to fight.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right? To think that some people actually chose this life. Not all of them were, desperate or forced. Some were actually drawn to the fame, the fortune, I guess the adrenaline rush. It's like they were the ancient celebrities, in a way.
Exactly. Think about it. Their faces were everywhere. On mosaics, pottery, even graffiti. Can you imagine seeing your own likeness plastered all over town like that? And it wasn't just the lower classes either. The Wikipedia article mentions an equestrian.
An equestrian?
Yeah, a member of the Roman elite who volunteered as a gladiator.
Wow.
Talk about high-stakes gamble.
That's crazy. It just goes to show you, right, just how powerful that pull of the arena must have been to risk everything for a shot at glory, to defy death and become a legend. It's a good reminder that human motivations, well, they're not always so simple.
And that brings us to a kind of a paradox. The social standing of gladiators in Roman society. They were revered, for their bravery, their skill, their willingness to face death. But at the same time, they were also stigmatized, considered infamies.
Infamies.
Yeah, they were put on the same social level as like actors and prostitutes.
Wait, hold on. So they were superstars, but also outcasts. That seems like a bit of a contradiction. What does infamies actually mean in this context?
Well, in Roman society, infamies were basically people who had lost some of their legal and social rights, couldn't hold public office or serve the military, even testify in court. It was a way of marking certain professions as, well, dishonorable, even if they were popular.
So even with the fame, even with the admiration, gladiators were still denied basic rights? Like they were stuck in this weird gray area.
Exactly. They were celebrated and marginalized at the same time.
Yeah.
It tells us something about, well, this underlying anxiety in Roman culture, about violence and death. They loved the warrior ideal, but they also knew how dangerous it was to glorify people whose job was, well, killing.
It's definitely a complicated relationship. Speaking of complicated, this Wikipedia article, it talks about a gladiator named Flamma, a Syrian gladiator. He was offered freedom multiple times, but chose to stay in the arena. Can you believe that? Freedom is freedom, right? What would make someone stay?
Yeah, Flamma's story, it kind of challenges our ideas about freedom and happiness. For him, the arena, it wasn't just a place of combat. It gave him, purpose, identity, community even. He was a master of his craft, respected, probably earned a decent living. In a way, his choice shows us that, well, that strange appeal of the gladiator life, that mix of danger and adulation. It makes you wonder, what really makes a life fulfilling?
It really does. Okay, but let's address the big question here, the ethical side of things. Gladiator combat, I mean, it was brutal, bloody, all about death, really. How did Romans, writers, philosophers, how did they wrestle with the morality of it all?
Roman attitudes towards gladiator combat were, well, complex. Some, like Seneca, saw it as barbaric, went against Roman values. They criticized the bloodlust, the dehumanization. Others, like Cicero, focused on the courage, the stoicism, saw it as, well, an embodiment of Roman ideals.
So even back then, people were debating the ethics. It wasn't just mindless violence. It was something people thought about, argued about, had strong opinions on.
Absolutely. One of the most interesting things, I think, is the concept of a good death. Yeah. That idea was, well, really important to how Romans viewed gladiator combat.
The Wikipedia article mentions that. Can you explain what a good death meant in the arena? How it connected to Roman ideals?
Yeah, a good death for a gladiator was about virtus. Yeah, manly virtue, courage, self-control. They were expected to face death with dignity, no fear, no complaints. This was tied to Roman military values, where soldiers were expected to sacrifice themselves for Rome.
Wow. So even in death, gladiators were upholding these Roman ideals. Pretty intense way to think about entertainment.
It shows you how intertwined gladiator combat was with Roman society, their values, their fears, their fascination with violence, and, well, death. And it wasn't just in the arena. Think about the impact on Roman art, fashion, even military training.
You see it everywhere. Mosaics, ceramics, graffiti. Like, they were the action heroes of their day.
And their influence, it went beyond the visual. Remember the Battle of Arasio?
Yeah.
A real disaster for the Romans.
Right.
After that, they needed better training for their legions. And who did they turn to? Professional gladiators.
That's right. The Wikipedia article mentions that.
It's fascinating. So they weren't just performers. They were skilled warriors. Their expertise was actually valuable to the Roman military. Makes you wonder, right? How much of the fighting was, well, showmanship versus real combat technique? Were they always trying to kill each other, or was it more like a performance with an element of risk as well?
Like trying to figure out what was real.
Yeah.
And what was staged. Yeah, it's like we're trying to separate, fact from fiction. But there's this one thing that's always bugged me. That whole thumbs up, thumbs down thing. Was that really how it worked?
Another example of how, pop culture shapes our view of history. The thumbs up, thumbs down. It's a modern interpretation, really. Not something we have solid evidence for.
Really?
Yeah. We actually don't know for sure what gestures were used to signal a gladiator's, death or reprieve. Roman sources mention a gesture called police verso, which means like with a turned thumb, but, well, its exact meaning is still debated.
So even after all this, after this Wikipedia article and everything, there are still mysteries about the gladiator games. It's fascinating, but also kind of frustrating, you know? It feels like the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know.
That's what makes history so interesting, though, right? It's not just memorizing facts. It's a process of discovery and reinterpretation. There's always something new to uncover, another layer to peel back.
You're right. You're right. It makes you want to keep digging. So what does this all mean for us? What can we as modern listeners take away from all this, from this deep dive into the world of Roman gladiators?
I think there are a few key things. First, it reminds us that history is rarely simple. Gladiator combat, it was brutal, for sure, violent, but it was also deeply connected to Roman culture, their beliefs, their values. It's easy to judge the past, but we need to try to understand it on its own terms.
Yeah, to see the world through their eyes, even if their world seems so different to us.
Right. And second, I think it makes us look at our own, well, fascination with violence, with spectacle. We might not have gladiator arenas anymore, but we have our own forms of entertainment that, well, revolve around risk, competition, even violence sometimes, extreme sports, combat sports, even some of the themes we see in movies and video games. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What do these things say about us? Are we really that different from the Romans?
It's a good question. We like to think we're so advanced, so civilized, but maybe human nature hasn't changed that much.
And finally, I think studying the gladiators reminds us of, well, the incredible strength of the human spirit. These were people who faced death all the time, but they still found ways to live, to love, to make friends, to find meaning. Their stories, they show us what we're capable of, even in the face of, well, unimaginable adversity.
Makes you think about Flemma again, choosing to stay, facing his fate, even when he had the choice to walk away.
It does, doesn't it? It makes you think about the choices we make, the things we value, what we're willing to risk, and, well, what we'll leave behind.
Well, I think we've definitely gone beyond Are You Not Entertained this time. This deep dive, it's shown us that there's so much more to the gladiator story than just the fighting. We've explored their origins, how they evolved, their impact on Rome, and even how they still influence us today.
And who knows what else is out there? New discoveries waiting to be made. New ways of understanding the evidence we already have. The story isn't over yet.
That's what I love about history. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Roman gladiators. It's been a journey.
It has.
A huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise with us. I always learn so much from our conversations.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this adventure. We hope you enjoyed it. Keep those questions coming. And until next time, happy exploring. Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. And today we're going to be tackling a topic that I think is on a lot of people's minds these days, and that is fusion power.
Yeah.
Fusion power. Yeah.
That's certainly a hot topic.
Hot topic, yeah.
Literally.
Literally, yeah. So we're going to be looking at the Wikipedia page on fusion power today.
Okay.
And I've got to say, when I was prepping for this, I was so captivated by the idea, of basically trying to recreate the sun's power here on Earth.
It is pretty amazing.
Yeah, talk about ambitious, right? So, we're going to get into all the nitty-gritty details, the different approaches, the fuels, the challenges, and also the triumphs, because there have been some significant milestones lately.
Yeah.
So, fusion power, I think for a lot of folks out there, it can sound a little bit intimidating, maybe even a little bit science fiction-y.
Sure.
But I think what's cool about this deep dive is that we're going to break it down in a way that's hopefully really easy to understand and even fun.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one.
You too.
So let's start with the basics, okay?
Right.
What exactly is nuclear fusion?
So at its core, nuclear fusion is the process of taking lighter atomic nuclei, so think like hydrogen, and smashing them together with such force that they fuse to form a heavier nucleus.
Okay.
And when this happens, a tremendous amount of energy is released.
And just to be clear, this is different from the kind of nuclear power that we use today, right, in our power plants?
Exactly, yeah. Today's nuclear power plants rely on fission.
Fission, yeah.
Which is essentially splitting atoms apart.
Okay, so it's opposite.
Yeah, so fusion is all about combining them, and fission is all about, breaking them apart.
Got it.
And it's this fusing process that powers the sun.
So when we look up at the sun,
Yeah.
And we feel its warmth.
That's fusion.
That's fusion happening right there.
Every second, the sun is fusing tons of hydrogen into helium
Wow.
and releasing that energy that bathes the Earth in light and warmth.
That's incredible.
It is.
And so we're essentially trying to, I guess, bottle that process here on Earth.
Exactly.
Which, when you say it like that, it sounds a little audacious.
It is audacious.
But there's some pretty compelling reasons why we're pursuing it.
Oh, absolutely.
What?
Well, for starters, the fuel source for fusion is practically inexhaustible.
Really?
Yeah, the primary fuel we're talking about is deuterium,
Mm-hmm.
which is a heavy isotope of hydrogen.
Okay.
And it's found abundantly in seawater.
Seawater. Okay, so we're not talking about some rare, element that's hard to come by.
Nope, it's readily available, and there's enough of it to potentially power fusion for millions of years.
Millions?
Millions of years.
Okay, so that's pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
But what about the waste? One of the big concerns with nuclear power today is the radioactive waste.
Right, and that's where fusion really shines.
Okay.
Because it produces a fraction of the radioactive waste compared to fission.
Okay.
And what waste it does produce decays much faster.
So it's not like, this waste that's going to be around for, tens of thousands of years.
Well, not at all.
And what about safety? I think, Chernobyl, Fukushima, these are the things that come to mind when people think about nuclear power.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Right.
But with fusion, the risks are fundamentally different.
Okay.
Because if something goes wrong, the reaction simply stops.
It just shuts off.
Yeah. There's no risk of a meltdown like in a fission reactor.
Okay, so it's inherently safer in a way.
In a way, yeah. It's like a safety switch built right in.
Wow. Okay, so it's sounding pretty good so far.
It is.
Abundant fuel, less waste, safer. So what's the catch? I mean, it can't be this easy, right?
Catching on quick.
Yeah, right. There's got to be something.
There is, and it's a big one.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me.
The challenge lies in replicating the extreme conditions found at the sun's core here on Earth.
So we're talking about like incredible temperatures, pressures.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We need temperatures hotter than 100 million degrees Celsius.
100 million degrees Celsius.
Yeah, and immense pressures. And then we need to confine this superheated matter, which is in the form of a swirling cloud of ionized gas called plasma.
Plasma.
Yes.
Okay, and we need to confine this for a long enough time for fusion to actually occur.
Right, and that's the tricky part.
Because plasma, I'm imagining, is not the easiest thing to contain.
It's not, no. It's like trying to hold lightning in a bottle.
Wow. Okay, so how do we do it? What are the tools, the technologies that we're using to try to achieve these incredible conditions?
So there are two main approaches, and they both sound like they're straight out of, well, science fiction, really.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So the first is magnetic confinement.
Okay.
And the second is inertial confinement.
Magnetic confinement, inertial confinement.
Let's start with magnetic confinement.
Okay, let's
So
get there.
picture this, a giant donut-shaped device called a tokamak. Yeah, and this tokamak uses incredibly powerful magnets to create a magnetic field.
Okay.
And this field is so strong that it actually traps the superheated plasma, preventing it from touching the reactor walls.
So we're basically suspending this mini sun in a magnetic bottle.
Yeah, you got it.
That's wild.
It is. And the most ambitious example of this is ITER,
ITER.
which is an international collaboration in France that's building the world's largest tokamak.
Wow. Okay, and what's the goal of ITER?
Their goal is to prove that fusion can produce more energy than it takes to sustain the reaction.
So to achieve that net energy gain,
Exactly.
which would be, I mean, that would be huge.
It would be a game changer.
Yes.
It would demonstrate that fusion power is actually feasible on a large scale.
So ITER is like the flagship project for this whole magnetic confinement approach.
It is, yeah, it's the big one.
Okay, so what about inertial confinement? What does that look like?
So inertial confinement takes a slightly different approach. Instead of using a steady magnetic field, it uses lasers or particle beams
Lasers.
to compress and heat a tiny fuel pellet.
So they're basically trying to create a mini star explosion in a lab.
In essence, yeah, it's like a controlled explosion on a microscopic scale.
Okay, and what are some of the leading examples of this approach?
Well, there's the National Ignition Facility, or NIF, in the United States.
Oof.
Yes, they made some pretty incredible breakthroughs recently.
Yeah, I remember reading about that, achieving, what was it again?
Ignition.
Ignition, right.
They managed to release more energy from fusion than the lasers delivered to the fuel target.
Okay, so that's a big deal, right?
It's huge. While it's not yet practical for power plants, it proved that we can create the conditions where fusion releases more energy than it takes in.
So it's a proof of concept.
Yeah, a major milestone.
Okay, so we've got these two leading approaches to tokamaks and laser-driven systems, both incredibly complex, both pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it?
It is. And it's not just about the technology itself.
Right.
There's also a whole set of scientific criteria that we need to meet
Yes, absolutely.
to actually make fusion work, right?
And one of the most important ones is called the Lawson criterion.
The Lawson criterion, okay, I vaguely remember seeing that term in the Wikipedia article, but remind me what that is again.
So the Lawson criterion defines the specific combination of temperature, pressure, and confinement time that's needed to achieve a net energy gain from fusion.
So it's like the magic formula for fusion.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay, and this formula, I'm guessing, is not easy to satisfy.
Not at all. In fact, it's one of the main reasons why fusion has taken so long to develop.
So it's not just building the machine, it's also solving this complex equation.
Precisely. It's a multi-layered challenge.
Wow, so it's pretty incredible that we've come this far.
I agree. It's a testament to human ingenuity and persistence.
Absolutely. And speaking of how far we've come, I was reading that the first controlled fusion reaction was actually achieved back in 1958.
That's right, at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
1958. I mean, wow, that's a long time ago.
It is, yeah. Fusion research has a rich history and has been a long and winding road.
And there have been a lot of different players involved, right?
Absolutely. Early research in the Soviet Union played a crucial role in developing tokamak designs, for instance.
Okay, so it's been a truly global effort from the beginning.
It has, yeah, and it continues to be.
Okay, so far we've talked a lot about deuterium as the fuel source, but I remember reading that there are other types of fuels, right?
That's right. Deuterium-tritium fusion is the most common approach being pursued, but there are other options.
Okay, like what?
Well, one is deuterium-to-deuterium fusion, which eliminates the need for tritium altogether.
Okay, and what's the catch with that one?
Well, it requires even higher temperatures to achieve.
So even more challenging.
Even more challenging.
And I also remember reading about something called aneutron fusion.
Yes. That's often considered the holy grail of fusion.
Okay, and why is that?
Because it's a reaction that doesn't produce those pesky neutrons that we talked about earlier.
Okay, so no neutrons. What does that mean in terms of, practicality and benefits?
Well, it would mean significantly reduced radiation risks.
Okay.
And waste disposal would be much easier.
So it's like the ultimate clean energy source.
In a way, yeah, it's the ideal scenario.
Okay, but I'm guessing this is still very much in the realm of theoretical, right?
It is, yeah. It's extremely challenging to achieve the conditions needed for aneutron fusion.
So it's like the ultimate goal.
Yeah, the ultimate goal.
Okay, so we've got this whole spectrum of possibilities, each with its own set of advantages and challenges.
It's a fascinating field.
It is, and there's so much more to explore, but you know what? I think we should probably take a quick break and give our listeners a chance to digest all this amazing information.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, and when we come back, we're going to dive into the materials that are actually used to build these fusion reactors and how we can harness that incredible energy to power our world.
I'm looking forward to it.
We'll be back in a flash. Okay, so we're back, and now I'm really curious about the actual materials that are used to build these fusion reactors.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Because, I mean, we're talking about extreme conditions.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about temperatures hotter than the sun.
Yeah.
A constant bombardment of high-energy neutrons.
It's like designing a spaceship to fly through a star.
It kind of is. It's a material scientist's dream, or nightmare, depending on how you look at it.
So, I mean, what kind of materials can even withstand that kind of punishment?
Well, one of the most promising contenders is tungsten.
Tungsten.
Yeah, tungsten. It has an incredibly high melting point.
Okay.
And it's relatively resistant to those neutrons that can cause damage over time.
Tungsten, isn't that what they use in light bulb filaments?
Yeah, the very same.
Wow. Okay, so from lighting our homes to containing a mini sun.
Pretty versatile stuff.
It is. But even tungsten, I mean, it must have its limits, right?
Oh, it does. Even the toughest materials degrade over time in a fusion environment.
So it's a constant, I guess, battle against wear and tear.
You could say that, yeah, researchers are constantly looking for ways to improve durability. They're exploring exotic alloys and advanced manufacturing techniques.
So it's like a never-ending quest for the ultimate material.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so let's say we've got our super durable reactor. We're creating these fusion reactions. How do we actually capture that energy and turn it into something useful, like electricity?
That's a great question, and there are a few ways to do it.
Okay.
One common approach is to use a lithium blanket.
A lithium.
Yeah, picture a thick layer of lithium surrounding the reactor core.
Okay.
And this blanket absorbs those high-energy neutrons that are released during fusion.
Okay.
And by absorbing those neutrons, it heats up.
Okay, so it's like a giant heat sink.
It is, and that heat can then be used to create steam, which in turn drives turbines to generate electricity.
Ah, okay, so it's not the fusion reaction itself that's directly creating electricity. It's the heat generated by capturing those neutrons.
Exactly. It's a multi-step process.
And I guess the lithium blanket also serves another purpose, right? Breeding tritium.
That's another advantage of using lithium. It can help us create a closed-loop fuel cycle.
Wow. Okay. So we're generating electricity. We're breeding fuel. It's like this amazing symbiotic system.
It is. It has the potential to be very efficient and sustainable.
But are there other ways to capture that energy? You mentioned there were a few.
Yeah, there's research into something called direct energy conversion.
Direct energy conversion. Okay.
And this aims to capture the energy of charged particles directly.
So cutting out the middleman, so to speak.
Yeah, no need for a heat exchanger or turbines. You're essentially converting the kinetic energy of those particles directly into electricity.
Wow, that sounds incredibly efficient.
It does, but it's still very much in the early stages of research.
Okay, so a lot of potential there, but maybe not something that's commercially viable just yet.
Not quite yet, but who knows what the future holds.
Okay, so we've talked about the materials, we've talked about how we capture the energy, but let's be realistic, we're still a ways off from seeing fusion power plants, popping up everywhere, right?
That's true. It's a complex undertaking, and there are still many hurdles to overcome.
Like what? What are some of the biggest challenges that are still out there?
Well, for starters, the sheer complexity and cost of building these massive fusion reactors.
Okay, so it's not just a scientific challenge, it's also an engineering and a financial challenge.
Exactly. It requires a massive amount of resources and expertise.
And how long are we talking about? Realistically, when do you think we might see, fusion power making a real difference in our lives?
Most experts agree that we're still at least a couple of decades away from widespread commercialization.
Decades. Okay, I know these things take time, but, we're facing some pretty urgent challenges right now with climate change and energy security.
I understand that sentiment. It can feel frustrating.
It does, yeah, because the potential of fusion power is so enticing.
It is, but it's important to remember that we're essentially trying to recreate the processes that power the stars.
Yeah.
It's a monumental task, and it's going to take time to get it right.
I guess patience is a virtue when it comes to scientific breakthroughs.
It often is.
But, knowing that so many brilliant minds are working on this, I can't help but feel optimistic.
I agree. There's a lot of momentum building in the fusion community right now. The investment is growing, the collaborations are expanding, and we're seeing some really promising results.
So while we can't predict the exact timeline, we can say with confidence that fusion power is coming.
Absolutely. It's no longer a question of if, but when.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the basics of fusion to the challenges and the triumphs.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has, and now I'm really curious to learn more about the people and the organizations that are driving this quest for clean energy.
Yeah, that's where the story gets even more exciting. It's a global race with both public and private sectors vying for the fusion prize.
Okay, so let's shift gears and dive into the world of fusion research and explore who's leading the charge in this energy revolution.
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so we're back and ready to really explore the landscape of fusion research.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting time to be following this field.
It is, and I think, for a lot of people, fusion has always seemed like this distant dream, something that's always, 20 or 30 years away.
Right.
But it feels like, lately there's been this surge of progress and investment.
Yeah, there's definitely a renewed sense of optimism and momentum.
Okay, so let's talk about who are the major players, the big names in fusion research these days.
Well, you can't talk about fusion without mentioning ITER.
ITER, yeah, the big one.
Yeah, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. It's a A truly global effort. 35 countries are collaborating on this project.
35 countries.
Yeah, it's being built in southern France.
Wow. Okay. And ITER, this is the one that's been in the works for decades,
Oh,
right?
it's been a long time coming, but they're making steady progress.
And what's the latest with ITER? What are they working on right now?
So their aim is to achieve first plasma in the next few years.
First plasma. Okay. And what does that mean exactly?
It means they'll be creating a superheated plasma within the tokamak.
Okay. So that's like a major milestone.
Oh, it's a huge step towards proving the feasibility of fusion power.
So ITER is kind of the flagship project, I guess you could say, for this whole endeavor.
Yeah, it's a really big deal.
But it's not the only one, right? There are other tokamak experiments going on around the world.
Absolutely. There's the JT60SA in Japan.
Okay.
It's a joint project between Japan and the European Union, and it's actually currently the largest and most advanced tokamak in operation.
Okay, so they're gathering valuable data, I'm assuming, that will feed into, future designs and so forth.
Exactly. It's all part of this global effort to make fusion a reality.
And speaking of global effort, China's also a major player in this field, right?
They are, yeah. They
Yeah.
have the Experimental Advanced Superconducting Tokamak, or EAST,
Least, okay.
and they've been making some impressive strides in achieving long-duration, high-performance plasma operations.
So they're really pushing the boundaries of what's possible with these tokamaks.
They are, and it's really exciting to see.
It is. So we've got these big tokamak experiments happening, but what about inertial confinement? What's the state of the art on that front?
Well, NIF is still the big name in inertial confinement.
NIF, the National Ignition Facility in the U.S.
Right, and they made headlines recently for achieving ignition.
Yeah, that was huge news.
It was a historic achievement, and it proved that ignition is possible even if it's not yet practical for power plants.
Right. So it's a proof of concept, but still a long way to go before we can actually plug our homes into a NIF-like device.
Exactly, but it's a crucial step in the right direction.
And speaking of steps in the right direction, one thing that I've been really excited to see is the rise of private companies in the fusion space.
Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable how much private investment has poured into fusion in recent years.
Okay, so who are some of the big players in the private sector?
Well, there's Commonwealth Fusion Systems, TA Technologies, General Fusion, Tokamak Energy, just to name a few.
Okay, and what are some of the unique approaches that they're taking?
Well, Commonwealth Fusion Systems, for example, they're developing a compact tokamak that uses high-temperature superconducting magnets.
Okay, and why is that significant?
Because those magnets
Yeah.
allow them to achieve stronger magnetic fields in a smaller device.
So potentially more efficient, more affordable.
Exactly.
Okay, and what about TE Technologies? What are they up to?
TE is pursuing a different path. They're using a linear reactor design called a field reversed configuration.
So instead of a donut shape, it's a straight line.
Yeah, like a cylinder.
Okay, interesting. And they believe this offers some advantages in terms of stability and scalability.
Right, and then you have General Fusion.
General fusion.
They're developing a really unique approach called magnetized target fusion.
Magnetized target fusion. Okay, I haven't heard of that one.
It's a hybrid approach. It combines aspects of both magnetic and inertial confinement.
Wow. Okay, so they're kind of taking the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you could say.
So it's really amazing to see all of this innovation and different approaches happening.
It is. It's a really dynamic field right now.
It is. It's like a fusion think tank on a global scale.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about it. All these different minds coming together, sharing ideas, pushing the boundaries.
Okay, so we've got all this activity, all this progress, but I think the question that's on everyone's mind is, when? When can we realistically expect fusion power to make a real difference in our lives?
Yeah, that's the big question. And I wish I had a crystal ball, but, most experts agree that we're still at least a couple of decades away from widespread commercialization.
Decades. Okay, so maybe not in time to solve the immediate climate crisis, but hopefully in time to really make a lasting impact.
I think so. I mean, the progress we've made in recent years has been remarkable. The investment is growing, and the global collaboration is stronger than ever.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. This is not just a competition. It's also a collaboration.
Right, we're all in this together.
We are, and I think that's what gives me hope, knowing that so many people are working towards this common goal.
I agree. It's a really inspiring story. And you know, even though we don't know exactly when it will happen, I think we can say with confidence that fusion power is coming.
It is. It's no longer a question of if, but when.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty optimistic after learning all this.
Me too. I think there's a lot to be excited about.
And I think, for our listeners out there, if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by all the doom and gloom in the world these days, I think this is a story that gives us hope. This is a story about human ingenuity, about collaboration, about our ability to overcome seemingly impossible challenges.
Absolutely.
And who knows, maybe one of our listeners out there will be part of the generation that finally unlocks the power of the stars.
I hope so.
That would be amazing. So, to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of fusion power. Keep that sense of wonder alive, stay curious, and let's keep dreaming big.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right. Let's dive into something I think we've all seen a million times, but maybe not fully grasped.
Yeah.
The yin-yang symbol.
Right.
It's everywhere these days.
It is.
How much do we really know about what it represents beyond just a cool-looking design?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that has just permeated pop culture, hasn't it?
Totally.
But the actual philosophy behind it, this ancient Chinese concept of yin and yang, is so much deeper than just what you see on a T-shirt or whatever.
Exactly. That's where we're doing this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going beyond just that simple black and white symbol
Right.
and getting into the real nitty-gritty of yin and yang.
Love it.
We've got the Wikipedia article on it, and surprisingly, there's some pretty fascinating stuff in there
Really?
about where these words come from
Okay.
and how yin and yang show up in different cultural practices.
You might be surprised by how far-reaching this concept is.
I'm ready. I'm
Okay.
ready to be surprised. I
Yeah.
feel like everyone throws around yin and yang, but I'll be honest,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I could really explain it beyond the basic opposites attract kind of thing.
Well, let's start with that iconic symbol then.
Okay.
It's often mistakenly called the yin-yang symbol.
Oh, really?
But I didn't know that.
Its real name is the Taiji too.
See, I already learned something new.
Okay, good.
Okay, so break it down for me.
All right.
What's the deal with those swirling teardrop shapes? The black and white, and those little dots in each half.
Right, so the visual itself kind of tells a story.
Okay.
Those teardrops represent that constant transformation of yin and yang into each other.
Okay.
It's not a static thing.
Yeah.
It's this never-ending dance of opposites.
Right.
And you're right about the black and white,
Yeah.
representing those kind of opposites. Black or yin embodies darkness,
Okay.
things being more hidden, passive, cool, all those things.
Got it.
White or yang
Yeah.
is all about light, activity, warmth, those kinds of qualities. So it's like they're chasing each other in a circle,
Yeah,
but they're always connected.
exactly.
Okay.
And those dots inside each half,
Yeah.
they show that there's always a bit of the opposite present in each force. You can't have yin without a little bit of yang, and vice versa.
I've always wondered about that.
Yeah.
So it's not like a battle between good and evil or something, right?
No.
It's more about,
Not at all. Finding a balance.
you hit the nail on the head.
Uh.
It's a dynamic system where those opposing forces actually kind of create each other and depend on each other to exist.
Right.
They're not trying to destroy each other.
Yeah.
They're partners in this cosmic dance.
Speaking of that visual,
Right.
is it always black and white?
That's a good question.
I feel like I've seen other colors used too.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's not always strictly black and white.
Yeah.
Historically, you'd see other combinations sometimes with red replacing white.
Oh, interesting. So why the switch to red?
Does that change the meaning?
It does. It adds another layer to the interpretation.
Okay.
While white emphasizes the bright, expansive qualities of yang,
Right.
red brings in a fiery, active energy. It shows that even within darkness and passivity, which is the yin side,
Okay.
there's this inherent potential for transformation and action.
That's a really cool nuance that I never would have picked up on.
Yeah,
It really highlights how dynamic this whole concept is.
right.
So it's not just about the colors, but about how these forces are constantly in motion.
Think of it like tossing a ball up in the air.
Okay.
The yang energy is what propels it upwards,
Right.
gives it that momentum, but then yin is what brings it back down, that force of gravity.
I see.
Both are absolutely necessary for the action to be complete.
I love that analogy. It makes it so much easier to grasp. But it makes you wonder,
Chat.
what would happen if one of those forces just vanished?
Okay.
Like, no more yin, only yang.
Right.
What happens then?
That's where the idea of mutual wholeness comes in.
Okay.
Yin and yang can't exist without each other.
Right.
Imagine a world with only men or only women
Yeah.
without the other half of the equation.
Uh-huh.
That race wouldn't last beyond a single generation.
Wow.
Poof, gone.
Okay. That's a powerful image.
It is, isn't it?
You don't really think about it.
Yeah.
But everything really is interconnected like that.
Yeah.
It's not just some abstract idea. It's how reality works.
Exactly. Light can't exist without darkness.
Right.
Heat without cold. Creation without destruction.
Yeah.
It's woven into the fabric of existence.
It really is.
But we've been focusing a lot on the symbol itself.
Right?
Have you ever thought about the words yin and yang, like where they come from?
To be honest, I haven't.
Okay.
But now that you mention it,
Yeah.
I am kind of curious.
Right?
They just seem like these mystical words that have always been around.
Right.
What's the story there?
This is where it gets really interesting. You see, the Chinese language is incredibly visual,
Uh-huh.
and the characters for yin and yang are actually pictographs.
Wait, so the words themselves are like mini symbols?
Precisely.
Oh.
The character for yin has elements like mound and hill incorporated into it,
Okay.
visually connecting it to the shady, colder north side of a slope.
Interesting.
It's about darkness, things being concealed,
Uh-huh.
the more passive aspects of nature.
I see.
And then yang
Yeah.
has elements like sun and sunbeam,
Okay.
representing the bright, warm south side of the slope.
Got it.
It signifies light, openness, that active outward energy.
So even in the language itself,
Mm-hmm.
they're reinforcing that idea of these opposing forces
Yeah,
that are tied to the natural world.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it goes even deeper than that.
Does it?
There are some fascinating linguistic connections to other languages in the region,
Oh, really?
like Burmese and Lepcha.
Hmm.
For instance, the Burmese word for overcast is incredibly similar to the Chinese word yin.
Why?
It's like these ancient cultures
Yeah.
had a shared understanding of these concepts, even across different languages.
That makes you realize this isn't just some ancient Chinese thing.
Right?
It speaks to something universal
Yeah.
about how humans see the world.
Uh-huh.
This idea of duality
Yeah.
was mind-blowing.
It really is, and we're just scratching the surface here.
Oh, wow. I mean,
Next, we'll move beyond the abstract
yeah.
and look at how this concept actually plays out
Right.
in different aspects of Chinese culture,
Huh.
from ancient divination practices to
Yeah.
martial arts and traditional medicine.
Okay, I am so ready for that.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's go. So we've delved into that fascinating visual symbol and those surprisingly deep linguistic roots of yin and yang.
Yeah.
But now I'm excited to see how this ancient wisdom actually gets put into practice
Right.
in the real world.
Yeah, I'm with you. Give me some examples. How do these abstract ideas actually manifest in different areas of life?
A perfect place to start, I think, is with the I Ching,
Go ahead.
an ancient Chinese divination manual. It dates back to the Western Zoo period.
Wow.
So we're talking centuries upon centuries of history here.
Okay.
It's all about understanding change and how to navigate it.
Right.
And yin and yang are the very heart of that system.
You know, I've always been curious about the I Ching. I've heard of it,
Yeah.
but I have to admit how it actually works is a bit of a mystery to me.
It's actually quite elegant in its simplicity.
Okay.
The I Ching uses a system of broken and solid lines to represent yin and yang.
Okay.
A broken line represents yin, that receptive yielding energy,
Right.
while a solid line represents yang,
Okay.
that active creative force.
So it's like a visual language for
Yes.
different kinds of energy.
Exactly.
Okay.
These lines are then combined into groups of 3 called trigrams.
Try great.
Each trigram has a unique meaning based on how those yin and yang lines are arranged.
Uh-huh.
Some trigrams are more yang in nature,
Right.
with more solid lines,
Got it.
while others lean towards the yin side with more broken lines.
Okay, so you have these trigrams.
Yeah.
What do you do with them?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
You combine the trigrams further,
Okay.
stacking two of them on top of each other
Right.
to create what's called a hexagram.
Hexagram.
And this hexagram, it's like a map,
Uh-huh.
a snapshot of how different forces are interacting and influencing each other
Okay.
at a particular point in time.
So by understanding what those trigrams mean
Yeah.
and how they're combined in the hexagram,
Right.
you can get insights into a situation,
You got it.
like maybe predict how things might unfold.
Exactly.
Ah.
It's essentially a way of using the principles of yin and yang
Okay.
to tap into those patterns of change
Right.
and make decisions accordingly.
You know, before this, I just thought of the I Ching as some mystical fortune-telling tool.
Yeah, I get that.
But seeing how it's actually based on these fundamental ideas
Mm-hmm.
about opposing forces,
Yeah,
it's kind of brilliant.
it really is, but the I Ching is just one application.
Right.
Let's move on to something that might be a bit more familiar.
Okay.
Traditional Chinese medicine.
Oh, yeah. Acupuncture, herbal remedies.
Right.
That stuff has always fascinated me.
Uh-huh.
I've always wondered how yin and yang fit into all that.
Well, in traditional Chinese medicine,
Yeah.
health is all about maintaining a balance
Hmm.
between the yin and yang energies within your body.
Okay.
When that balance is disrupted, that's when illness arises.
So too much yang energy
Yeah,
could lead to certain symptoms,
it could.
and too much yin would lead to others?
Exactly.
Both.
For example, an excess of yang energy
Yeah.
might manifest as things like fever, inflammation, or hyperactivity,
Interesting.
while an excess of yin might lead to things like chills, fatigue, or depression. Right.
It's all about finding that sweet spot.
So things like acupuncture and herbs,
Mm-hmm.
those are used to kind of nudge those energies back into balance.
Precisely.
Okay.
A skilled, traditional Chinese medicine practitioner uses their knowledge of yin and yang
Right.
to diagnose what's out of whack in the body
Mm-hmm.
and then prescribe treatments that will bring everything back into harmony.
It's like fine-tuning an instrument.
I like that.
And I'm guessing different herbs would have different yin and yang properties.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Some herbs are considered more warming and stimulating, which would be yang,
Right.
while others are cooling and calming, which would be yin.
This is making me realize just how deeply rooted in philosophy traditional Chinese medicine is.
It really is.
I'm definitely going to have to look into this more. But before we go down that rabbit hole,
Okay.
what about Tai Chi?
Yeah.
That's another practice I've always been curious about.
Tai Chi is a fantastic example of yin and yang in action.
Okay.
It's a martial art.
But it's also a moving meditation, all about embodying that interplay of opposing forces in your body.
I've always pictured those slow-flowing movements.
Right.
But what's the philosophy behind that?
One of the core principles of Tai Chi
Mm.
is this idea of yielding to overcome,
Okay.
which is very much in line with the yin and yang philosophy.
Right.
It's about using softness and flexibility
Mm-hmm.
to redirect an opponent's force
I see.
rather than meeting that force head on
Mm.
with your own force.
I can see the connection there.
Yeah.
It's like water flowing around a rock
Exactly.
instead of trying to smash the rock.
Right.
You move with it,
Mm-hmm.
using its energy against itself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
There's a great quote by Wu Jianquan,
Okay.
a renowned Tai Chi master,
Hmm.
that sums it up perfectly. In terms of self-cultivation, one must train from a state of movement towards a state of stillness.
Wow.
Tai Chi comes about through the balance of yin and yang.
Wow. That's a powerful image. Finding stillness within movement.
It is.
It's like Tai Chi is training you to find that balance, not just physically,
Right.
but mentally and emotionally too.
Exactly. It's a practice that integrates the mind, body, and spirit,
Yeah.
all through the lens of yin and yang.
It's amazing how this one concept, this idea of seemingly opposing forces working together,
Right.
can be applied to so many different aspects of life.
And we've only just touched on a few examples.
Wow.
There's a whole world of wisdom waiting to be explored through the lens of yin and yang.
That's incredible.
But I think it's time we wrap things up
Okay.
and reflect on what we've learned today.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes. We've gone from unpacking the visual symbol
Yeah.
to uncovering the linguistic roots of yin and yang, and then seeing how those ideas are actually lived out in practices like the I Ching, traditional Chinese medicine, and Tai Chi.
It's pretty amazing how this concept,
It
it's
is.
something that originated thousands of years ago,
Right.
still feels so relevant today.
I know, it's crazy.
It's like it touches on something fundamental
Yeah.
about how the universe works and how we can find our place within it.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
This idea of duality and interconnectedness.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's woven into the fabric of our understanding of the world.
Yeah,
And yet I feel like we often forget about it
we do.
in our day-to-day lives.
It's easy to get caught up in that modern mindset
Right?
where everything is about separation,
Yeah.
competition, categorizing things as either good or bad, right or wrong.
Totally.
We forget to look for the connections,
Mm-hmm.
the ways in which seemingly opposite things might actually be complementary.
It's like we're so focused on the individual pieces
Yeah.
that we miss the bigger picture,
Right.
how those pieces fit together to create a whole.
Exactly. What this deep dive has hopefully shown
Yeah.
is the importance of embracing both sides of the coin,
Right.
recognizing that every force has its counterpart,
Mm-hmm.
and that true harmony lies in finding the balance between them.
So how do we actually take this ancient wisdom
Right.
and apply it to our modern lives? It's one thing to understand yin and yang in theory,
Yeah.
but how do we actually live it?
That's the real challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
The first step is awareness.
Okay.
Now that you have a deeper understanding of yin and yang,
Uh-huh.
start noticing how that interplay shows up in your own life
Right.
and in the world around you.
So like being more aware of the ebb and flow of our own energy,
Exactly.
recognizing when we need to push forward with that yang energy,
Yeah.
that drive and ambition,
Mm-hmm.
and when we need to pull back, rest, and recharge with that yin energy.
Love that.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's about being more open to different viewpoints, even those that seem to contradict our own.
Right.
Instead of immediately labeling something as wrong,
Uh-huh.
ask yourself, what can I learn from this perspective?
Right.
How does it fit into the bigger picture?
I love that. It's like shifting from a mindset of conflict
Yeah.
to a mindset of integration.
And the beauty of it is that you can apply this to any aspect of your life,
Right.
from your personal relationships
Yeah.
to challenges at work,
Mhm.
even to global issues.
It's everywhere.
It's about understanding that every situation, every challenge contains within it the seeds of its own solution.
Mm.
It's about recognizing that those seemingly opposing forces
Mm-hmm.
are actually working together
Right.
to create a dynamic and ever-evolving whole.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
I'm
I
glad.
feel like I have a whole new framework
Yeah.
for understanding the world and my place in it.
That's what it's all about, expanding our perspectives,
Yeah.
embracing the wisdom that has been passed down through generations.
Like-
So the next time you see that yin-yang symbol,
Wow.
remember, it's more than just a cool design.
Yeah.
It's an invitation to look deeper,
Mm-hmm.
to see the interconnectedness in everything, and to find that balance within yourself and the world around you.
Beautifully said. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of yin and yang.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
Until next time.